Delivery is one of the single most important things that a person can make use of when they are preparing a speech. Stop, please. That is no way to speak to an audience. That is reading to an audience. It's not connecting with an audience. My eyes are on my piece of paper. I'm staring at the paper. I'm not looking at my audience, and therefore, I'm not able to get feedback from my audience on how to change my performance, to slow down, to speed up, to smile when my audience is smiling. All of these are dimensions that can only be achieved by delivering a speech to an audience where you're actually conversing with the audience. And so that's what I hope to accomplish in this video instruction lecture. And specifically what I would like by the end of this lecture, so to speak, is for you to know how to enhance your own delivery when you deliver a public speech. Excuse me. When I say your own delivery, what I'm saying is you shouldn't try to be somebody else. You should work with what you have, the way that you speak, the way that you conduct yourself, your facial expressions, and of course your mistakes, which are very, very natural. So try to enhance what you already have. What I'd like to cover in this instructional video today are basically 5 main points. The first thing I want to talk about is fear. The second thing I want to talk about are types of deliveries. The third thing I want to talk about are selecting wording for your speech. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is aspects of delivery. And the last thing that I want to talk about is evidence, how to cite evidence during your delivery. So let's take on that first thing, which is fear. And study after study after study has shown that fear continues to be fear of public speaking continues to be the #1 fear that people have in life, even more than death, more than high bridges, more than getting stuck on an elevator. And part of the reason for that is because we don't like to be judged. And when we're giving a speech, we feel like we're laying our personality out in front of people and they're judging us without us really knowing their thoughts, and that makes us uncomfortable. Another reason that we don't like to speak in public or are afraid of it is because we are uncertain about what could go wrong. What happens if we forget? What happens if my visual aid doesn't work? What happens if I can't answer a question that the audience has? All of these things lead us to be fearful of speaking in public. But fear is very natural. Fear is a great motivator. If you follow baseball, you know that every time we get to the playoffs in baseball, there's some player who's been hitting .228 all year long, which is a very, very low batting average, and suddenly in the playoffs, they become like Babe Ruth. They hit the ball over the fence 2, 3, 4 games in a row. And that is because they are taking that fear that they have and they're channeling it. They're channeling it and using the energy from it to help their performance. And that's the same idea behind public speaking, is you don't really want to try to eliminate the fear. It's not going to go away. But what you want to do is use it. You want to use fear to help be a motivation to help you prepare for your speech. If you're afraid, then you're more likely to prepare better. But also during the speech, you want to use the energy that you get from the fear to inform your delivery. It's absolutely okay for you to make mistakes up there. We expect human beings to make mistakes. I've stuttered several times in this video. Audiences actually like it when speakers make mistakes because it makes them seem more real. It makes them seem like a real person rather than a robot up there. So I don't have a lot to say about fear other than to try not to eliminate it. But what you can do is you can practice your speech. You can make sure that you are well acquainted with your notes and your outlines. And you can go to the room before you speak and get a feeling for it so it doesn't seem like a big surprise once you stand up there behind the podium. Those are the main things that you can do to help channel that what will probably be natural fear and make it work for you as opposed to against you in your speech. Now let's move on to our second point for today, which is types of delivery. And there are many different types of delivery depending on the audience and the occasion and the context. So one type of delivery is known as the manuscript delivery. And that's where you actually read a prepared text. Every single word is written out for you. You'll find, for example, the President of the United States using this kind of method because he may have some things that he needs to talk about having to do with foreign policy, for example, that simply he has to get exactly probably right. Otherwise, another country could take offense, or it could generate some hostilities that weren't intentional in the speech. So you find a lot of situations where people write out the entire speech. But of course, it's not advised. It leads you to read the speech and not deliver it. And it leads you not to connect with your audience because your eyes are on the manuscript. And so let's move on to the second type of public presentation. That is by memory. That's where you memorize the entire thing, which you can pull off if you're an actor or if you have an excellent memory. And you do end up being very spontaneous, and you're able to adapt to a situation. You can break away from what you planned on talking about and talk about something else in the middle of your speech when you're doing a memorized speech. But at the same time, if you lose your place in your memory, you may have to start all over again in the speech. And also, some memorized speeches don't allow you to adapt to the audience because you're going to deliver exactly what you've memorized, and therefore your speech is not really spontaneous. It doesn't really match up with what the audience's changing interest might be during the speech. So let's now move on to the third type of delivery, which is the impromptu delivery. And that's where you speak off the cuff, you speak spontaneously, you decide that some situation calls forth a speech. It's like when you go to a wedding and you're sitting around at the reception afterwards, at dinner, and all of a sudden you decide you're going to stand up and say something about the groom or the bride. Or let's say that you're in a classroom and the professor hasn't arrived and it's 10 minutes after and you're wondering what to do, so you decide to raise the question, what do we do? Do we stay here? Do we go? Do we try and work on the project that has been assigned to us? You're speaking impromptu in those situations. It's a good method of speaking because it's very, very responsive to the audience, but often it can be very disorganized because you don't have an outline like we learned yesterday in class. So that leaves us with the fourth type of delivery. This is the preferred method that we try to teach in this class, and it's called an extemporaneous method of delivery. Extemporaneous. E-X-T-E-M-P-O-R-A-N-E-O-U-S. Extemporaneous. And that means speaking from an outline, in essence. And the beauty of that method is you have a plan, you have your main points in front of you. In fact, you have the intro, the body, and the conclusion, and the most important part is the body, which has the main points. You have all of that in front of you, but also you have room to select your own wording on the spot. You have room to answer a question that the audience may have. You have room, if something occurs to you in the middle of your speech, you can put it in there. You can do all of that. It's a beautiful method of delivering a speech because you've got a plan, but you also have spontaneity. And that's why we teach the outline in this class as the way that you should deliver a public speech. The outline allows you to be extemporaneous. Let's move on to the third point for today, which is wording in your speeches. And I'd like to advise you when you're thinking about what words you want to use in your speech, either when you're preparing your outline or during your speech, you want to do a few things that help you avoid annoyances to the audience. One thing that you want to do is to be clear, for example. If you say that there was a really long line outside the bookstore, that could be a very unclear statement to people because the length of the line is all relative. Somebody could consider two people in line to be a long line, whether others would have to see the line out the door before they would consider it to be long. So in order to be clear in your speech, you need to give examples and you need to use description. So if you're going to say that the line was long, then say something that tells us what you think long is or what you want us to think long is. Tell us that the line stretched back across the store and out the door, and there were probably 100 people in the line. Okay, now we see what you mean by long line. You are being clear. The second thing about your words is you want to try and be vivid with your imagery. You want to try and be descriptive. If you're saying it was a beautiful sunset, similar to the long line idea, try and describe it in words that will get across an image that we can see in our minds. It was a beautiful sunset. There was a big orange ball that was as round as anything you could imagine setting onto the horizon, and you could see the wavy air beneath it because of the heat that was coming up from the surface. And there were a few scattered clouds which turned pink after a while. And within these clouds, you could see the silhouettes of birds flying across the sky. Okay, I'm not expecting you to be a poet here, but what I'm trying to say is to be descriptive in a way that brings about an image and makes it come to life. That's what being vivid is all about. And the last suggestion for you in your wording is to be conversational. And that means to try and avoid fillers like right, you know. These are ways that we try to buy time in a speech because we can't think of the words that we want to say. So we say or we say right. We want to try and avoid that because those are annoying tendencies to the audience and they start to get distracted by those instead of listening to our words. It is much better if you can't think of your words to pause until your words come to you than to use fillers. So be conversational by not using fillers, and be conversational by using contractions. That's the way that we speak in real life. We don't speak like a term paper. We don't say they will not. We say they won't. We don't say they cannot. We say they can't. And that's the way that we want you to speak in a public presentation so that you can connect with your audience. Now let's move on to our fourth main point for today, which is aspects of delivery. And really this is all about using your body language and all the other tools that you have aside from your voice to help deliver the message in an interesting way. And so you can use the rate of your speech. For example, if you start speaking very quickly, you're suggesting excitement. You can use volume. If you want to make a point that is really important, you can raise your voice. Or you can also draw importance to a point by speaking very, very quietly as well as another way to raise attention to a particular item in your speech. Use your body and your hands. It's tough for me to do that here sitting in a chair as I'm recording a video, but once you're behind the podium, you can use your hands to help reinforce your message. You can use your face and your eyes to also try and reinforce the message. And you can, of course, use visual aids, which would be PowerPoint, or it could be an object that you hold up if you're talking about something that you got from Mexico. Here's a little pencil holder my friend got me from Mazatlan, Mexico, and it's got some holes in the top for the pencil. And this is made out of actually a seed pod. This is a pod that grows on a tree, and inside of it there are seeds. And they have, typical of Mazatlan, Mexico, turned it into a beautiful little thing that you can actually use to hold pencils. You can use objects in your speech as well to make your speech interesting. If you're going to use objects, though, you must introduce them, you must explain them, and you must put them away when the time has come. Don't just say, see this. Say, introduce what you're looking at. What I'm showing to you now is a pod from a tree that has been carved into a pencil holder and then shellacked to give it a protective finish. I want you to look at the detail in the figures that have been carved out here, which go back to the ancient Aztecs, the native population that lived in Mexico, in this case playing ball, playing a game. Introduce the aid, show the aid, interpret the aid, and then put it away. All right, that now takes us to our final main point for the speech for my instructor video today, which is evidence, and particularly how do you cite evidence. Yesterday we talked in a speech about how you have to give 2 sources of testimony or 2 interviews that you're going to conduct with experts that have to do with your group presentation, and you're going to blend those into your speech. I talked to you yesterday about how the qualifications section in your introduction is where you cite your sources, and in that qualifications section, what you give is the following information. You give the what, you give the who, and you give the when. If you can remember those 3 things, what, who, when, then you're giving the information that we need in the qualifications. So for example, the what could be that 1 out of every 6 females will experience a sexual assault during their lives. 1 out of 6. That would be the what. That's the information that comes out of your interview that you're conducting with somebody. The when is going to be what year it was published or when it was said. You could say, I got this from a conversation that I had in an office of a professor yesterday. You could say, I got this from an article on the internet. You could, in the year 2013, you could say that this was on a TV newscast that you saw in the month of May. You're giving the when. So you've got the what, you've got the when, and the last is the who, or is the source. I got this from CBS News. I got this from a professor of psychology. I got this from a report that I read that was in the library, and it was from a journal called Critical Studies in Mass Communication. So you've got those three entities every time you cite information. If you put them all in the qualifications section, it's going to come out something like this. In order to research our topic, our group interviewed a professor, blah, blah, blah. Our group spoke to a manager at blah, 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 blah. We did this last week, and this is what they said. Only we're going to leave the this is what they said to the body of the speech. Right now in the qualification section of the intro, I'm just telling you the two pieces of information, which is the who, and it's the who and the when, and we're going to leave the what for the body of the speech. Now, the three types of evidence that you can cite in your speech include testimony, which comes from your interviews. That's number one. Number two, statistics, which you can get from journal articles or studies that are published on the internet, or you can do your own survey if you want. You can do a survey of 10 people, 20 people, etc. Those are statistics or numbers, if you want to think of it that way. And then the third kind of evidence is observation, something that you have seen or somebody else has seen. If you're a person, for example, who is an expert at archery, then you can comment on archery from your observations. You can say, I have seen how people have have moved from being a novice at this sport, they couldn't even come near the target, to striking a bullseye all the time. That's your own observation. It's an example of the three types of evidence. So for your speech, you've got two that are required. You've got the two pieces of testimony that you're going to get from your interviews, but you can also use statistics in your speech when you're talking about the future and what your prediction is going to be, and you can also use observation. As long as when you cite that information, you cite the who, the what, and the when. I hope that was helpful. Tomorrow, I am going to post another video lecture to help you with the structure of your group presentation and how you fit 3 people into an outline when you're making a presentation. So there will be a video instruction lecture tomorrow, Wednesday, as well. But for today, that's going to wrap up delivery. I hope you now know how to enhance your own delivery. I talked about 5 ways to do that. One is to think about fear as something that is natural. The second, I talked about types of delivery that you should select from, the extemporaneous one being the main one. The third thing that I talked about today was the wording in your speeches. The fourth was aspects of delivery. And finally, we talked about evidence. I hope now as we get closer to your Thursday presentations that you're feeling more and more confident. Have a great day.